Hey everybody. So I wanted to do a longer form video on how I am making my bead trees. I'm starting with a slab of clay that's about 3/8 of an inch thick, and I'm using my clay compass to cut a nice round circle. Once the circle's cut, I take away the scrap. Smooth the edges, and then I'm going to use this template to mark the halfway point across the edges of the circle of clay that I've rolled and cut. That way I can cut a nice straight line and have two perfect half circles. When you're lifting slabs of clay, you need to be careful not to bend them too much because clay has a memory and will try to revert back to that when it's drying and firing. So carefully lift the slab up and set it off to the side. Here you can see I've got some pre-cut and arranged pieces of coil that I'm going to use to create the rest of the bead tree. I'm just checking with the template again to make sure that I know exactly where I'm going to put the upright supports for the bead tree, and also make sure that when I moved my slab of clay that it kept its shape. So I'm going to set this off to the side to dry and work on one that I've already started. Here I am rolling out more coils. I'm being careful as I roll these coils out to make sure that I don't end up with any flat spots or really thin spots, because I want my coils to stay strong, and the best way to do that is by ensuring that they are an even thickness all the way through. Once I get the coil to the thickness that I want, I'm going to use a ruler. Any ruler works as long as you're consistently using the same measurements, and I'm cutting 5-inch pieces that I'm going to use to make the upright supports of my bead tree. I'm also cutting one extra long piece that's going to be used to create supports diagonally across the center of the bead tree. So the next thing I do is smooth out the edges and make sure that the cut sides are nice and flat so that they will fit better in the bead tree as the vertical supports, and then just double checking that the length is correct so that all the pieces are accurately the same length. I'm tapping the ends on the table to just flatten out where I've pushed the clay while I'm rolling it. Another way to roll out your clay is to use a flat board to get more even downward pressure on your coil if you don't feel like you can use your hands. Once all the pieces are cut and shaped to size, set them off and wait until they become leather hard. Here I've got a piece that's been drying overnight, so you can see that it's nice and firm. It's about the same consistency as a bar of chocolate. It's not completely bone dry, so I'm still able to use the clay and work it and join the pieces together. But it's also not freshly soft, wet clay that's going to bend every time I try to pick it up. So here I am just double checking where I've scored on the half round piece to make sure that everything is well textured. I'm also going to go ahead and score all the ends of my vertical upright supports. And I'm going to take my vinegar and a little bit of slip from the jar, and I'm going to pre-moisten every spot that I have scored and give that vinegar a chance to soak into the leather hard clay a little bit. My method for attaching two leather hard pieces is to score and add slip and white vinegar, and then very gently just give the pieces a little wiggle together until it feels like they have grabbed onto each other and attached. And then I'm going to just let them sit until the slip that has squooched out of the sides is no longer shiny. And that tells me that the moisture has been absorbed by the clay. So while that sits, I'm going to score the top of the vertical supports. And then I'm going to set my coil, my half round coil piece on top of those supports. And I'm just going to give a little mark with my needle tool so that I know where to score on the top of the bead tree. Once I've got all my spots scored on the top and the bottom, I'm going to repeat the slip and vinegar and then gently set the coil top on top of the vertical supports and repeat the little wiggle jiggle technique to make sure that all the pieces are firmly attached to each other. And I'm not going to immediately clean those joints up. I'm going to go ahead and let them sit again. While that's sitting there, I'm going to go ahead and start poking my Nichrome wire pieces into the leather hard coil at the top of the bead tree. I initially made those Nichrome wire pieces at a 90-degree angle, but quickly realized that 90-degree angle is not conducive to the shape of the pieces that are getting hung on them. So I had to open those back up a little bit so that it was a more generous angle, probably closer to 135 degrees if I had to make a guess. So after I put my first couple pieces in, I wanted to double check and make sure that I had them spaced properly for the pieces that are going to be hung off of them in the kiln. This particular bead tree is actually going to be used for glazing spoons. So here I have some bone dry spoons that I had previously made up. They've got a little bit of a hole drilled into the end of the handle, and I'm testing to see how that's going to hang on the bead tree. And I got 2 of the spoons to make sure that they don't touch each other when they're hanging, which I found out that I put my wire pieces too close together during this process. I think when you're building yourself a bead tree for glazing pieces in the kiln, it's a really good idea to have some pieces that will be used on the bead tree pre-made so that you can make sure that you get your Nichrome wire pieces spaced properly for the work that you are trying to glaze. Now, if you look carefully, you can see that I have got Nichrome wire poking into the front and the back of the arched part of this bead tree, and then only on the inside of the straight piece. And my reasoning for doing that was that I wanted to be able to bump other glaze pieces up against the back of the bead tree, or to put 2 half circle pieces together in the kiln during the firing process to maximize my use of space. And the final step that I'm going to do here before I start cleaning everything up is to put in 2 horizontal supports. As I was putting the Nichrome wire into the coil, I realized that a 5-inch upright coil may not be the strongest building technique for this design, especially with the weight of spoons hanging on it. And I wanted to add some extra stability during the firing process. So I hung a couple spoons up and looked to see where they are in relation to those vertical supports to give myself an idea of where to place the horizontal support so it doesn't impede the spoons when they are hanging. Here I'm just marking on the vertical supports where that horizontal piece is going to attach so that I can score it in the proper place. And then I'm just really carefully going in with a needle tool and scoring those spots that I had previously marked without putting too much stress on the vertical pieces, causing them to bend. So I'm about to go ahead and attach the second piece, and I'll speed up the video here. So there you have it. That is my completed bead tree made from coils, slabs, and Nichrome wire. Hopefully it survives its first couple firings in the kiln, and I will let you know how it goes. If you were going to make one of these, what would you use it for? Share in the comments.